Thank you very much. After celebrating this commitment, we go to the next session. Now we will know the experience of the private sector to contribute to finance the transition to a low-carbon economy, and this panel will be moderated by Angel Vergés. Thank you very much, Angel, and you have the floor.
Okay, thank you very much. Good morning, welcome to everybody, and let me first say this is an honor and a privilege to be here moderating this panel, and of course an issue of responsibility also, because the responsibility that we have at the financial sector to contribute to transition to a low-carbon economy. The panel will try to concentrate on what is the role that the financial system, especially the private agents of the financial system, have to play regarding this responsibility about transition to a low-carbon economy. The importance of the financial system in monitoring, helping, pushing, signaling the transition to a sustainable growth economy has been around for many years, and what I want to emphasize is that there has been a joint public and private road that has to continue if we want to be successful. The importance of the financial system was first set and established by the famous tragedy of the horizon of Mark Carney, the governor of the Bank of England and the former chairman of the Financial Stability Board, when he said that the effects of climate change will be suffered by future generations, but the cost to incur to avoid those effects have to be borne by current generation. So as long as the financial market role is to fix prices for time span, that is the best. The financial system is in the best situation to lead this change, and that is where he established the task force on financial disclosure that started to make recommendations on how should the financial system be more transparent, more disclosing, etc. But what I want to emphasize is that regardless of these regulatory pressures or this regulatory guidance, the private sector has started to move by itself. Even before these regulations imposed some pressure on the financial system. This pressure came from stakeholders, from investment managers, from asset owners, which in the end started to canalize, to channel their sensitivities regarding sustainability toward the financial system. This is why the financial system started to give answer and to incorporate commitments like the one we have been signed a few minutes ago here here with us. Well, as I said, if we have the public sector paving the way and marking some frameworks like the one the European Commission established last year with the action plan and the successive regulatory developments that are expected to come, especially the one related to taxonomy. We're having the public sector paving the way and marking the path, and the private sector responding by itself. What is best than having a joining of efforts? And this is what the financial centers for sustainability came around. Promoted and imposed by the United Nations, all over the world started to be created financial centers for sustainability. There are so far, as far as I know, 29 of them, and among them we have here two of them. One from Zurich and one from Madrid, from Spain. Both of them are members of this network of financial sector for sustainability, whose aim is basically to exchange experiences and best practices in order to show how the financial system can help this transition and can help agents in the economy, whether they are families, companies, etc., to do this transition in the most efficient in the most efficient way. As I said, in the panel today, we are going to have one representative, the CEO of the Swiss Financial Center, which is Sabine Novelli, and the chairman of the recently created, at the beginning of the year, FinRes, which is the center created in Spain. Both of them, as well as many other, as well as the large majority of the financial centers for sustainability in the world, have a transversal characteristic. In which sense? Well, in the sense that most or all of the agents working in the financial system, whether they are banks of any nature, private banks, saving banks, cooperative banks, asset managers, and insurance companies and pension plans, all of them working together and trying to channel all these sensitivities regarding transition to a sustainable economy, join their forces in order to signal to the economy and to help stakeholders and constituencies how to do this transmission. This is all I want to say, and I will pass the word on them, asking just a first question. What was the driving force behind the creation of your center? And first of all, for in terms of chronology, as the Swiss financial system was created almost 6 years ago, I would like Sabine to tell us what was the main driving force behind the creation of the Swiss financial system, and what has been the main achievement so far. And then I will ask José María to do the same regarding the Spanish Financial Center for Responsibility. So, Sabine.
Thank you, Manuel. Do I have sound? Now I have sound, yes. I'm very pleased to be here today in Madrid, and I'm impressed by the drive that was developed around COP25 to get sustainable finance action moving in Spain as well. I'm very honored to be here today and tell you a bit more about what we've done in Switzerland. Angel mentioned it. We launched the initiative more than 5 years ago, and it was purely bottom-up. It was market-driven. At the beginning, there were 6 or 7 financial institutions that just thought it's important to bundle forces, to exchange know-how, to build a broader network to promote sustainable finance in the Swiss Financial Center. So the overarching goal was promoting sustainability across the financial center. We're talking about asset managers, banks, insurance companies. We then gathered other players such as business schools, even public sector representatives that supported us at the beginning to get going, and other finance associations. So purposefully we tried to build a broad platform to exchange know-how, to develop tools and useful reports as well, to just get the topic going. But it wasn't, I'm impressed by the kind of commitment we just saw from the Spanish banks covering so much of the market as well. In Switzerland, it wasn't that targeted at the beginning. It was really just creating a platform to exchange know-how. And even now, we don't have a formal commitment on, for example, reporting, let alone reduction on an industry level. It's still bottom-up, and each bank is just also sharing know-how in this subject to move forward.
Okay.
Well, in our case, very clearly, first, let me say that this is a joint initiative of all the industrial associations representing financial firms. We are talking about banks, but we are talking about the old savings banks that are banks today. We are talking about cooperative banks. We are talking about insurance companies. We are talking about the investment firm association, Inverco. So basically, we are talking about the whole of the financial system in Spain. So in terms of coverage, it's even bigger than just an agreement of the banking sector, first. Second, we put this in place quite a few months ago. So this was not done at the last minute like the previous one. This was done, early before. Pilar was driving the insurance association, was a driving force behind this. Why? Because we realized first that we are going to play a fundamental role in terms of delivering, this change of finance and of the real economy to a more sustainable growth model. We are key, first. Second, we are going very fast. We are going very fast, all of us. And sometimes we are going faster than the knowledge that we have on the subject, which is good. I would not say that running is better in this environment than not running. When you are talking about climate change, you don't want to take time to understand. You have to move forward. But at the same time, we thought that it was very important to understand, first, our role in this process, and second, how we should explain to the society as a whole, to our clients, what is the role of banks. Many times I come along with people that are not in our world, and they tell me, why don't you start financing green projects? Well, for us to finance green projects, we need our clients to come with this type of green projects. Without demand, the supply, us, we can be ready, but we need the demand. There needs to be a change in demand. And mobilization and explanation of what this is very important. Also, we need to send the message that, raising awareness is very important. But look, yesterday was in the newspapers, 96% of the Spanish population believes that climate change is for real, and this is coming, and it's going to have a negative impact on our life. So mobilization is there. What we need to go now is in the phase of organization, of having a plan. As you were saying, Jose Carlos, is very important. Public-private sector partnership is here key. Public sector has to play a very important role. For instance, defining what is green and is not green. This taxonomy. Seems like last Thursday there was a principle of agreement between Parliament and Council. Let's hope that this is settled. And we need to move forward to the planned part of this whole project. So, in a nutshell, this is why we are here. Let me tell you that I cannot recall of any other joint initiative of the Industrial Association of the representing the Spanish financial system as wide as the one that we are presenting today.
Okay, thank you. Well, the financial system has a variety of actors, and all of them are one way or another involved with all of this. Going back to the Swiss financial center, what are the main specialties? Or the main focus you are specializing on, and what are the role being played by different agents involved in your financial sector?
Switzerland is well known for its wealth management services, and linked to that we also have quite a strong asset management industry. So that's where we come from. We really come from sustainable investing. We talk about secondary market action, we talk about financial products demonstrating an impact. That's, by the way, another keyword that I could mention. Switzerland has maybe invented private sector impact investing. The first public microfinance fund directed at private clients was prepared in Switzerland, and seeing that we have different financial centers, one of them being Geneva, quite close to the international organizations, this has proven to be an ecosystem where such innovative financing solutions could emerge. But more importantly, of course, are the broad financial markets, and there one of our job is to do an annual market survey on sustainable investing. In the past 2 years, we've seen a growth of 80% of assets managed based on sustainability criteria, plus 80% in the past 2 years each year. So right now we stand at about 21% of assets managed in Switzerland. That includes assets directly managed by pension funds or insurance companies, which, by the way, were the major drivers behind this development too. And I think it's impressive to see this kind of growth, although I wouldn't say that all of these assets are purely sustainable or let alone taxonomy compliant. We talk about many different approaches, some of them more on the active ownership side, some of them more on the broad ESG integration side, but still it proves that the subject is just becoming mainstream, and that to me was always important. We didn't want to play in the niche and just grow a niche a little bit larger. We always wanted to affect the breadth of the financial services and just make ESG one element in a financing process, in an investment process, to make it the new norm.
I suppose that in this transition or increasing focus of wealthy people or even institutional investors towards sustainable and ESG oriented, you have done some pedagogy, for example, some research showing that, as I like to say, it pays to be green. Financially responsible investments are not only contributing to a better world, but they are profitable. I suppose that you are working in that direction as well.
We can absolutely confirm this, although we haven't done research ourselves on performance, but of course we constantly collect the research that is out there. Just 2 weeks ago, we organized a workshop for our members only, where we just gave insight into a new meta-study that clearly demonstrated that climate risks cause financial risk on every sort of financial product or activity, be it investing, be it lending, be it even in corporate finance. There are many studies out there that prove it just makes financial sense to take these aspects into account.
Okay, well, if the Swiss Center has some specialization regarding this wealth management due to the specific competitive advantage of Swiss, if we talk about Spain, I suppose that FinRes will have some type of focus on SMEs. In the end, Spain is probably one of among the largest European countries, the one where the role of SMEs is more important, and the role of the banking system with the SMEs is extremely important. And I suppose that SMEs play a very, very important role in the agenda of FinRes, isn't it?
Absolutely. I mean, you with the question, you have given the answer. I mean, Spain is a micro SME country, not even an SME country, a micro SME country. So the nature of the Spanish companies is extremely small compared to other countries. So our role is with FinRes, the big, deliverable that we need to bring out is how can we help our clients, which are basically, very small companies, to go through this, to navigate this world of sustainable finance, of climate change. We are talking about something that is going to be also key for them. It's not about just big companies. Small companies have the challenge, the same challenge I would say, but they don't have the means, the tools to go as fast as big companies through this, to navigate this sustainable finance world as fast. So we need to help them. That's the first thing. The nature of our clients is very small, unsophisticated client. We need to think how we can help them to go through this period of transformation. Second, I would also mention is that we in Spain, our clients are SMEs, but not just in Spain, are SMEs in many parts of the world. In Spain, we have big international companies, both in the banking world, in the insurance world, that are present in developing countries. Well, in developing countries, the unsophistication of SMEs is even bigger. So the fact that we can think about Spain, how we can deliver help to these small companies, will also help us in these countries that we are operating in, either as banks or insurance companies, to think how we can help these economies also to do this transition, considering that their real sector fabric is just as unsophisticated as the Spanish one. So that's the second element of the part. I mean, we can help Spain, but also we can help the world. The third element, and I would not, want to forget it, is that this is not disregardless of wealth management elements. I think that Europe is also a leader in terms of mutual funds regulation. We tend to think that Europe has, few leading worlds in the world. Well, the world of usage is one example of Europe. The European Union, exporting, benchmarks for the investment industry on a worldwide level. I think that this other element of usage of investment funds, how we can help, in an environment that is comprised of not so sophisticated players, I think that that's also an element and the strength of the European Union that we should not forget.
Okay.
If I may just comment on two
Sure.
points that you made, which I find very important. if you talk about SMEs, you're right. They cannot find a way through the jungle of new regulation and climate change by themselves. I see a very important role for banks to actually consult and advise SMEs in how to find the right way, depending on the sector. It's something that we haven't done so much in Switzerland, but there are some banks, especially Raiffeisen, that started to develop tools where SMEs can easily assess the energy efficiency of their business, and then they get advice on how to improve it. So I see an important role in this for banks. And another point that you made about the importance of bringing know-how to developing countries as well. That's, for example, where FC4S comes into play, Financial Centers for Sustainability. When they held their last annual meeting in Geneva in October, FC4S founded the Africa Hub. They now have 5 African financial centers on board, and one of the objectives of FC4S is to exactly promote or to bring know-how to the south as well, to other countries that still have even more challenges than we do in setting up efficient infrastructure. This is something that is also appealing to me when it comes to FC4S.
Good. So, what are, in your opinion and experience, the main drivers and stoppers for each of the financial sectors to contribute to a more sustainable economy?
Well, if I may start with asset management, the investing business, definitely the main drivers are clients there. We need institutional asset owners to be very clear about what they want. And there we've seen quite a shift, also thanks to initiatives such as the PRI. I mean, I hear from our members that nowadays they don't get any RFPs anymore, requests for proposals, without questions around ESG and without the question if they're a signatory to the PRI or not. So it's really the asset owners that also push asset managers to move forward in this. So definitely clients as an important driver. In Switzerland, less so the government. I can say so far we haven't had government action on sustainable finance. All the initiatives that we see are still completely voluntary. I think, well, our Federal Council, our government is currently discussing what they could do to further promote this topic, and one element that they touch on is transparency. So I see lack of transparency still as a barrier in further growing this business. And there, maybe the government has to come into play also to set some standards to actually achieve comparability of data. So maybe we need to go a step further when it comes to transparency.
That was another question that I wanted to ask. Regarding data, disclosure, reporting, standards, metrics, methodologies, etc., what are the main challenges ahead? We are all of us waiting for the European Commission to develop more accurately the taxonomy and to clarify much more what we need in terms of this type of. So, what are the main challenges, given that at the motto of this, the lemma of this COP25 is the time is now. So, what do we do? What do we do in between? What do we do in the middle? While we are waiting for this, I suppose that we should not be quiet and waiting. What should we do?
I think that is very important. Economic theory tells us that in the presence of uncertainty, the optimal thing to do is wait for the uncertainty to dissipate before acting. In the area of climate change, where you have a lot of uncertainty, this traditional recipe would be a disaster. In the area of climate action, we cannot wait and see uncertainty being dispelled, because when we see that happening, it will be already too late. So we have to accept that here we need to move forward at the same time that we are sorting out many of the questions that we have in front of us. So waiting is not an option. We cannot do what our instincts will tell us in the presence of uncertainty. First. Second, we need to recognize this is going very fast. And even for us, I mean, we want to act, but we cannot only act as much as the knowledge that is available is out there. We are still, developing the methodologies to measure carbon print. We are making a lot of progress there. We need to have, a medium-term vision of what are the taxonomies, the definitions. It's very important, the agreement of last Thursday between Parliament, the trilogue in the European Union. I think that because once again, I see the European Union leading the discussion on a worldwide basis of what is, green, what is not green. And probably, as Mark Carney, whom you have mentioned, said in a recent articles, it's about 50 shades of green. It's not just about being green, not green. I think that we will have to develop our mentality going forward in terms of, sophistication of the taxonomies. But very clearly, what we need is to understand that we are moving very fast, that we need to create at the same time, an environment where uncertainties are being reduced, not eliminated, and an environment where we are going to be able to see who is complying with compromises and who is not complying with compromises. On the issue of greenwashing is everywhere. It's in the private sector, it's in the public sector, it's in financial companies, it's in non-financial companies. Let me try to be, somewhat positive on this aspect. If you embark in greenwashing, it's because you realize that not being green is not acceptable. And that's a first step. Not just to continue doing greenwashing, but starting green action. So in that respect, I think that we have all the pieces in place. This is going to be very messy at the beginning. I think that we will have to accept. But what is very relevant is that with the help of the public sector, I think that is very important. We can reduce this structural uncertainty and move forward in a practical way, and at the same time, in a comparable way, in a transparent way, in a way where goals and targets can be assessed with hard evidence.
I fully agree that we don't have the time to wait until we agreed on the exact measure for each field or sector. So, we see it already happening. Banks try their best to demonstrate how sustainable certain products are, and every bank chooses their own method to do this. Of course, we need to see convergence in this. We do need to see more comparability. But I fully agree with you that you can't wait and just do nothing. You have to gather experience. You have to start comparing. And one thing that I would like to also add, we're at the COP here, so definitely climate is the most pressing issue, but we shouldn't forget that we are acting in a social environment too, and we need a just transition, otherwise the transition won't happen. So I'm a bit skeptical if I hear the EU focusing purely on green and saying, yes, we postpone S and G to later, because you need the G to actually come to the transformation, and you need social criteria to also make this transition just, otherwise I'm pretty convinced we will fail. So for me it's important to always look at ESG and integrate all three aspects into investment and financing decisions.
I would totally agree with that. I think that there is no disagreement with the E of environmental, S and social, and G of governance. If you don't have, a strong governance that can deliver what your clients need, even what your clients need, and they may not know yet that they need, this is not going to work. So we tend to concentrate, because of the place we are meeting, in the E, but the E of social and the G of governance are is important as the E for the future role of financial companies in society. We need to deliver to our clients what they need, even what they don't know that they need, but they do need.
Yes, as a matter of fact, regarding this, I agree with. We cannot wait for this taxonomy to be completely developed, etc., etc. It brings to my memory when the first report of the task force on financial disclosure came into public. It was somewhat criticized for not being compulsory and letting companies. It was voluntary to disclose, not disclose. And in the end, it has demonstrated that it wasn't so bad, because the market is exerting so much pressure that if you do not deliver what the market or your customers are expecting, you are penalized. So, which brings to this idea of pressure from investors on sustainable finance. I mean, do you think it's enough this market pressure versus people arguing for more regulatory pressure? Do you think that so far the market has been pressured, and this increase in the assets devoted to sustainable, both of course ESG? It's true that most of them goes to E, but do you think that the market pressure is enough?
Well, I don't know if market pressure is enough, but if you look at what has driven sustainable investments, I think the PRI was one of the major drivers. For me, it's the most powerful organization in sustainable investing today. And the PRI as well was principally bottom up. Yes, it's UN linked, but it's companies behind it that drive the work groups, that exchange information. So there again, it's not really top-down pressure. It happened over time. I think it might be different when it comes to lending, to SME lending. There, I don't think you can wait for client pressure, because the SME just wants to be financed and wants an easy way forward. There, I think it's really the responsibility of banks to offer tools to support them. You can probably less wait for pressure from the client side. I don't know how you see this.
Well, I would say that thinking about the latest IMF World Bank meeting in Washington, I cannot imagine of having more pressure on this subject than the one I saw there. ESG issues were everywhere. CFOs of big international banks meeting with their clients. The ESG question will come, not just as another question, really as the crucial question. People working in ESG now have a central role in their organizations, in their financial organization. And this was not the case, let's say, 1 year ago. 1 year ago, it was there, but not so much. So I think that on the side of the pressure, I don't think that we need more pressure. Frankly speaking, I don't think that we can stand more pressure on this. So I don't think that that's the issue. The issue is that when you start to think about the messages, once again, there's some beauty contest among, institutional investors, private institutional investors, of what is green and not green, what is supporting green and not green, or ESG issues. Well, it has a positive aspect in the sense that they are trying to compete for the best standards, not for the lowest ones. Competition for the better standards is always good competition. At the same time, when you think about this over time, it cannot be that each institutional investor has its own way of measuring these ESG issues and explaining to the public what they mean. We need some harmonization. We need some normalization. And within that role of normalization, I think that naturally, it will come, the demand from, the private sector to the public sector, well, put some order in this. Of course, we will ask the public sector, put some order, but don't be too rigid, don't be too hierarchical, be flexible. We will ask the impossible. So, as usual, that's our role. But at the same time, I think that this is going to come naturally over time, that we will have. Another area where, for instance, I'm a former regulator, that, a former banking regulator. All this debate for me on green incentives, brown disincentives, for me, in the medium term, there's no discrepancy between, the green incentives and the brown disincentives and risk management. The only thing that we have is that now regulators and banks look at risk on a 5-year horizon, and we are talking about risks that may come out in 10, 15 years' time. Mm-hmm. But if we do it right, there will be no contradiction between, solvency regulation, taking into account these elements, and delivering what needs to be delivered in terms of, a safer financial system. I see no contradiction in the medium term. In the short run, for sure, there are going to be challenges.
Of course, I agree. And regarding this, let me bring probably a sensitive issue regarding also this, the public involvement. I mean, public involvement has to do first with regulation, but also with setting some, let me say, by signaling and making some path to follow. What I'm talking about is the ECB, the European Central Bank. The European Central Bank, once they have restarted the asset purchase program, the pressure has started to realize, so why don't they contribute to this signaling regarding what should be available for buying and what should not be available for buying? The European Central Bank responds that monetary policy should not be mixed with this issue of sustainability issue. But if we have realized that sustainability is an issue of risk and therefore of financial stability, the European Central Bank has also responsibility on stability issues. So what do you think about this ECB position? Well, so far they have no position at all. But about this debate, whether the ECB, as a matter of fact, this debate in the UK was also very active also. Shouldn't they give in some example regarding what should be done in terms of investing in let's say, clean assets and not investing, or at least incorporating some bias against those assets related to most contaminant industries? What is your opinion on the especially you, Jose Maria, that has been involved in central banking also? I know that this is not an easy answer for that, and it's a huge debate even in the inside the European Central Bank Council. So what is your opinion?
You know that former central banks love to have an opinion on central banking when we are out. When we are in, we are too prudent to have an opinion. When we are out, we suddenly discovered a world full of possibilities. It's the same. Is there a contradiction? I would argue there is no contradiction, you know. The tragedy of the horizon means that we don't know when or which sector, but we know that in this evolution towards, you know, a more sustainable economy, depending, for instance, on the evolution of technology, you know, we are going to have stranded assets. We are going to have stranded assets, and let's not fool ourselves. When we talk about stranded assets, we are talking about stranded companies. The owners of stranded assets are going to be stranded companies. If the ECB were not to include this type of, imagine, you know, you have a AAA, you know, coal mining company bond. You buy it. In 3 years down the road, technologically, it's going to be cheaper. Let's imagine. It's going to be cheaper to produce, you know, energy with windmills than with coal. This company will go bust immediately. And the ECB, because another thing that people don't understand, the ECB finance the economy with collateral. They care about the collateral. They care about the guarantee. In this situation, they will have a guarantee with value zero. They will have to, you know, to absorb the losses. They are not going to be in a pleasant way. So to introduce these elements with prudence, with, you know, a medium-term perspective, there's no contradiction between risk management in the central bank world and, you know, risk management in a climate transition world. For me, there's no contradiction. So why not?
Probably don't have the right panelist in me in talking about leading central banks, because 2 weeks ago in Switzerland we had a big row in the media because our central bank at an event publicly and actively did a presentation on the reason why they did not include climate change into their investment strategy. Something that for us is hard to understand. The Swiss Central Bank has the third largest currency reserves globally. As you may know, they defend the Swiss francs from becoming too expensive. So they have a lot of assets on their balance sheet. And principally they say for them it's secure investing if they just invest broadly into the market, no stock picking at all. I'm fully with you saying that against the backdrop of climate change, it doesn't make sense to take companies into their books that face stranded assets sooner or later. So for me, it's definitely no contradiction, but I see the difficulty of adopting a very active sustainable investment strategy for a central bank that really has a currency role. I think it probably looks a bit different than for central banks that manage their own funds but don't have a currency mandate. But still, I think you could actually integrate climate risks, and it would make common sense.
It's also true that we are living in a very weird world where central banks now have balance sheets that are bigger than they have never been. In the old world, you will finance the economy, repo rate, and government debt. That was it. Now we are living in a world where you have central banks having sizable portfolio of investment assets, and with a wind down period that is becoming longer and longer. So it's also a byproduct of this crazy world that we are all living in.
Strange world. Okay, going back to the financial centers for sustainability and the ones you both represent. Well, we have seen about half an hour ago the signing of this commitment. Have in Switzerland your associates or members, the banking community, sign any specific commitment regarding reduction in emissions, like?
No, I told you when we prepared the conversation that this is actually a weak spot. I'm impressed with the banks signing up to such a commitment. We haven't done this so far in Switzerland. I can maybe say it's against the backdrop that we have seen a lot of activities even without a commitment. But it would be fully time for a commitment as well, a commitment that is more on a quantitative basis. What we've heard from our large banks, UBS and Credit Suisse, is a clear commitment that they want to be ahead of the market. We briefly discussed it. I think the financial sector cannot solve climate change against an existing economic reality, against existing frameworks for the real economy. But they can go one step further and try and move the sectors. They cannot become completely, net zero carbon by 2030. That's actually something that the climate youth is now asking from the Swiss banks, to be in their credits and in their investments carbon neutral by 2030. This cannot happen. The banks cannot just catalyze the whole change that also needs to happen in the real economy, but they definitely can play an active role and can go below the global average, that's for sure.
I think that in the case of INREST, the Financial Center for Sustainability that we have just put in place, we are talking about a very wide, a community of financial companies, from big to small, from banking, insurance, securities, markets side. We are talking about investment funds. We are talking about all type of investment figures, and for sure, the wider the net is, the more careful you need to be that everybody is on board. So for FinRest, making a distance with the declaration of banks, for FinRest, what we have announced today as a way also of compromise going forward is that, we accept the principles of sustainable finance. We make them our own, first. Second, we are going to work with our clients, with our financial firms in delivering this compromise. Third, we will do, the utmost to explain the role of the financial companies, the role of banks, insurance companies, securities firms, and security products in all this framework. And I would say that apart from communicating where we are, from explaining why this is so relevant, I think that the biggest compromise in this, declaration delivering things going forward is the fact that on a yearly basis we are going to report where we are on these compromises. The only way you can have a serious compromise is by disclosing what you are doing on a yearly basis, explaining what we are delivering in practice for our members, for our clients, is the only way forward. So very clearly we are making a compromise. The net is very wide, and the wider the net, the more careful you need to be in the way you deliver the compromises. What you don't want to have is a compromise that cannot be delivered because you are talking about very unsophisticated firms, financial firms, or very unsophisticated clients. I think that you need to be ambitious, but combine this ambition with realism. once again, this compromise on or reporting on a yearly basis on the progress that we are making in this institutional declaration is probably the most important thing that we can put forward.
In terms of ambition, I am also quite impressed with the principles for responsible banking that have a completely different nature compared to the PRI, because for the first time, banks that sign such a commitment, they sign a commitment to actually have a positive impact and to demonstrate it over time. We have now 6 banks, among them the 2 large ones in Switzerland, that signed the PRB, and for me this is really a new level, committing to positive impact. It's, by the way, also a shift that we do see with institutional investors. So far, when we talked about fiduciary duty, we really just related to the financial risks, sort of reducing the financial risks, entitled them to take ESG aspects into account. Especially in the Nordics and in the Netherlands, we now see that pension funds think a step further and tend to say it's their duty to have a positive impact. After all, this is also a matter of the time frame. If you think for 50 years, it does make sense to have a positive impact also from financial terms. So this impact question to me is a really key question for banks, and I'm quite pleased to see that the large ones already committed to this positive impact.
Okay. Well, so far we have been emphasizing a lot about, and in general, the approach toward the financial system and regulators is based on the risk dimension and the financial stability dimension. But what about the opportunity dimension? I mean, the transition, it brings clearly some opportunities that the financial system is ready to support. Don't you think so?
Absolutely. I think that here we need to find a balance between a nihilism where, well, this is easy and we can deliver this without, any social cost. We have to run away from that because, for instance, producing clean energy is going to be more expensive than producing non-clean energy. It's kind of a no-brainer. If producing clean energy would be cheaper than not doing, why would we not doing that already? It will have some cost. We need a social contract to deal with this cost, but also we cannot be totally pessimist. For instance, I love to say it, sorry for those who are present here, it's just 100 times I've been saying this, energy efficiency of housing in Spain, in a country that you have a home ownership ratio of 86%, 84% home ownership ratio. This is no big deal. We are talking about very simple thing. How can better isolate my house dwelling? You are going to be, doing something good for energy efficiency in winter, in summer. We are not talking about rocket science. There are many things here where rocket science will be needed. But there are other elements where really plain vanilla measures, what I call the green quick wins, can be delivered and where you have business opportunities. And at the same time, let's put it to an extreme, A bank that decides voluntarily, I know of no bank that is in this position, that decides voluntarily not to go into this avenue of sustainable finance. In 30 years, the demand will not be with him. The demand will be with the competitors that have moved to a greener world, to a sustainable world in terms of ESG. So, once again, of course, there are opportunities because if you don't move, if you don't act, you're out of business. Either because you have stranded assets in your balance sheet or because the demand has disappeared, because that demand is going to be aligned with ESG values. So for me, it's a no-brainer that this is, I wouldn't even call it a business opportunity. It's a must if you want to stay in business.
You talk about competitiveness. You can also bring this one level up. It's also about competitiveness amongst financial centers. I mean, Juan Carlos knows he represented Spain or Madrid in Financial Centers for Sustainability Annual Assembly in Geneva. Switzerland took this as an opportunity to also promote the Swiss Financial Center. We actually prepared this brochure. I brought a few copies where we just demonstrated what's the history in it, where does Switzerland stand in this. And we took the opportunity to organize a large event called Building Bridges event, trying to build bridges between the international organizations based in Geneva and the financial sector to try and stir innovation. So it's also about financial center competitiveness. I mean, we're friends at FC4S, but of course we're also competing for the business of the future.
So we know what we are going to do as a first step, to produce a brochure like this. So next time around, we will have our own brochure, Pilar. So I think that's competition is great. Competition is great.
Good. Okay, so since we are near the time allowed for this panel, I would like to ask you for some open debate or discussion or comment. How do you see sustainable finance evolving at the global, at the European, and at your local country level? Do you see both of them?
In which time frame now?
Well,
now
let's say, I mean,
in the
time is now. The time is now. So how do you see evolving? Are we able to answer to this challenge that time is now?
Frankly, I've worked in sustainable finance for over 20 years. The acceleration that I've seen in the past year alone is just so impressive. When we founded Swiss Sustainable Finance 5 years ago, we were this association of the sustainability people, of the banks and asset managers and pension funds in Switzerland. Now everybody wants to cooperate with us. We have SFAMA, the Swiss Fund and Asset Association. We have the Swiss Insurance Association as members. We have an MOU with the Swiss Banking Association. So everybody is trying to move now. It is in the process of becoming mainstream, clearly so. I can say in Switzerland, the EU Action Plan has also shaken people up. So maybe regulation does help. It didn't come from Switzerland, but it makes people move. And I'm very convinced that 10 years from now, sustainable finance will just be mainstream. Literally every financial decision has to take ESG factors into account. And I'm convinced we will be there 10 years from now.
For the financial industry, we are living interesting times, as the first Chinese curve says. We have, new regulation coming in, be it Basel, Solvency II, etc. We have the digital revolution. We now have, the ESG revolution. Well, the message to the financial industry is that you thought you were in a marathon. This is not a marathon. This is the Ironman. So we have to live up to the challenge. This is going to be, tough years ahead of us. Very interesting as long as you can survive the Ironman. So, second idea is, this is coming very fast. I was talking about the IMF World Bank meeting. The people present there know that I was saying this. I saw a lot of brainstorming in the IMF World Bank meetings. I saw more storms than brains. So we need to put a little bit more of brain, a little bit more of organization in all these things, because sometimes we go so fast, and it's good to go very fast, because we need to run on this area. We cannot wait. But at the same time, I think that I would make a call, a plea for the government in Spain, in Europe, on a worldwide basis, to put some order into this, so that we don't start to, stumble with each other, and interfere in this progress that needs to be there. We need a little bit more of brains and maybe a little bit less of storms. Just a little bit less.
Good. And just to finish, how would the centers you represent contribute to either to speed up this development of sustainable finance, or to put some order and doing things on an orderly way and being on a most effective way? Well, first of all, from the experience that you have accumulated in the 5 years, and see how from the Spanish Center we can learn from your experience. I mean, how can we help to speed up and to do an orderly transition, fast but orderly transition?
Well, what I see happening in Switzerland is really that we now cooperate with Swiss banking and with pharma on standards, and this is what has to happen. The large industry associations have to come on board. Here, obviously, you're the one that is leading the way. They have to come on board and also come out with guidelines and help their members to go down this path. and to find the order that you call for, to find an alignment in terms of the KPIs that are used, in terms of the way these things are set up also process-wise. I think we should also talk quite a lot about processes and not only about a taxonomy of what should be financed, but also how do you actually integrate it into the different processes. And I see quite a lot happening there. So I'm positive that we will continue this way. If the government further supports us by also, I mean, they still do by signaling, I think this word was mentioned, but even by setting some frameworks in terms of transparency, then this could even speed the development up further, I think.
I think that from my side, the message is very clear. Sabine, we're just 5 months old, but we run very fast. So be careful, because we are coming, and we are coming very fast. Second message is that when you talk about, the wide variety of financial firms that are behind this project, when we talk about our clients, we are talking about the whole of the real sector in Spain. So this is the capacity that we have. Our net is very wide, and this is a challenge. We have set the net very wide, and we understand that very well. At the same time, the benefits, if we can make this, deliver in the short run, tangible progress, is going to be immense for the Spanish economy, for the financial sector, but for the Spanish economy, for the Spanish real economy. That would be my message.
Okay, so thank you very much, and I think we have covered all the main issues that we have learned from the experience from the Swiss and the purpose that the FinRes has from the moment it's formally presented today, like the commitment. So thank you, all of you, and I hope that both of you contribute to a more sustainable world, and the financial sector contributes to that challenge. Okay, so thank you very much.
Thank you. Bueno.
Bueno, da igual. Iba a decir que hay 15 minutos, pero...